Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, Euruvin, Prakim Vav, Zayin, and Ches. Indeed, today we will be making the Siyum on Hilchos Euruvin. We are beginning with Perek Vav. We learned up until now the dinim of an Eruv Chatzeres / Shituf Muvois, and now we are starting to learn about Eruv Tchumen. All of the 3 chapters will be about the Eruv Tchumen. Perek Vav will be about the Eruv Tchumen basics, focusing on being ma'arev with oichel or hanachas oichel, as we will learn. Perek Vav has 24 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Says the Rambam, Mi sheyatzim min ha-medina erev Shabbos. If a person wants to leave the city on erev Shabbos, someone leaves the city on erev Shabbos, and the person deposits somewhere outside of the city the amount of food that is needed to have 2 meals. This is something that we already learned in the previous section of Euruvin, of Hilchos Euruvin, and that is the amount of 18 groigeres, or 18 dried up figs, or approximately 6 eggs. And here's the key word, v'kavash v'sasei sham. Either he decided to establish his residence there, or the meaning is by doing so, he establishes his residence over there. Even if prior to Shabbos he returns home, but he left his food in that location, so nechshav oisei ki'ilu Shabbos b'makim sheniach b'shtei asudis. It's considered as if the words are he was koine shavisa, which means that he acquired his place of residence for Shabbos at the location of his food. Mikan, also as we learned also in yesterday's share regarding a beis dira, right, that you have to eat in. Here also the eating is interestingly more koiveya than sleeping. Since you eat there, or you have food which will potentially allow you to eat there, that's why halachically we can consider that is your place of residence. And the placement of food, as we mentioned, is called Euruvin Tchumen. Really, in next chapter, we're going to learn that you don't always have to deposit food. You could actually be there yourself. And that extends to a concept of kinyan shvisa, b'richuk machim, as we'll learn, God willing, in the next chapter. But we begin by the concept of extending your tchum by the placement of food. Okay. Now, we learned in Hilchos Shabbos Perek Chav Zayin, the din of tchumen. The Rambam paskins that tchumen is midoiraisa, which means that you may not walk beyond the place which you took Shabbos in. That includes if you took Shabbos in a city or in a Reshus HaYachid from outside of the city or from outside the Reshus HaYachid. Midoiraisa, you cannot go beyond 12 mil. Midrabanan, which is what we're discussing here, because we have to keep rabbinic law, of course, we're not allowed to go beyond 2,000 amma. When you place your food over there, the law doesn't change. You are still bound by the biblical 12 mil. You're still bound by the 2,000 amma, but you only begin counting it from the place of your food. Says the Rambam Malacha Beis. And therefore, you can now walk the same distance, which is 2,000 ammas in each direction, but ground zero is the place where you left your food. Let's not forget details that we learned towards the end of Hilchos Shabbos. Like, for example, the Rambam paskins that if you took in Shabbos out there without intent of coming to the city, you were kind of shvisa, you were on a trip and you stopped and you said, that's where I'm keeping Shabbos. If a city happens to be within the proximity of 2,000 ammas, if you remember what we learned is that when you walk into the city, we don't say that since the edge of the city was within your 2,000 ammas, and once you entered the city, you can consider the whole city dalad ammas. We don't say that. We say that only if the entire city is swallowed in the 2,000 ammas, as we learned there. But if your 2,000 ammas end somewhere in the middle of the city, you can only walk until that location in the middle of the city. And the same thing will apply over here. That if you can walk from the place of your Eruv towards the city 2,000 amas. And but if the 2,000 amas ends in the middle of the city, that's all you can walk. Now, however, but if the entire Medina was swallowed within the 2,000 amma, only then do we say, and Allah Gimel further Ketzad, for example, see, the Rambam is emphasizing you didn't place your aid of 2,000 amas away from the city. The Rambam cannot say that. The Rambam is saying that you placed your aid of 2,000 amas from your house in the Medina. Because when do we say that since you took Shabbos in the city, the whole city is your dalad amas? That's if you intended to take Shabbos in that city. Then the city is only like dalad amas, even if the city is like Ninveh. But the moment you're kind of your shavisa outside the city, that is where you are really are halachically, then you only get to walk 2,000 amas. And if, for example, your house would be 2,000 amas plus an amma away from the place of your Eruv, you would not even be allowed to walk there. It would be beyond your Eruv. The Eruv was placed, he's saying, 1,000 amas from your house. That's what we're counting. So now, you can walk from the place of your food 2,000 amas to the Mizrach. And only another elef because you only get 2,000 amas, even if the second 1,000, right, is not going to cover your whole Medina. Then you cannot walk in your whole Medina. The Ein Malach Medina Elat Seifa Elef. Hoyse me Beis El Seifa Medina Pachas mi Elef. Afila Ama Achas. Shenim Tseis mi Dosei Kos L'Chutz Medina. But if from where you placed your food, if you're going towards the direction of your city, to the other end of the city, all of it is within the 2,000 amas. Only then do we say that the city is like 4 amas, and therefore v'yahala chutzalam shei meya. Then you can walk the other 996. You can't walk another 2,000 amas, but then you can walk because the city does eat up to 4 amas. And therefore, Allah Chadala Lefikach. If you put the Eruv exactly 2,000 amas away, again, not from the Medina, from the house in the Medina, which is great because you put the Eruv within your Tchum. But that also means that since your house is at the edge of your tchum, it's 2,000 amas away from the food, you cannot walk 1 amma towards the other direction. Hifsid es kol amadina kula. V'nimsa on one side, mahalach mibesi ad eruv el paim amma. And from the eruv back to his house, 2,000 amas. So that's great. But but you cannot go in our case if you put the Eruv towards the Mizrach, you cannot walk out of your house towards Maidav, even 1 amma. Gavaldik. Now, another thing, as we mentioned, if you're kind of shavisa inside a city, if you're kind of shavisa inside even a Reshus HaYachid, you only begin counting the 2,000 amma when you leave the city, when you leave the Reshus HaYachid. So let's go with the same logic. If you were to place your Eruv Tchumen out there, but in a home, then there also, you don't count 2,000 amas from your food. You only count the 2,000 amas from when you leave that home. Even if you put it in a city as big as Ninveh, we're speaking about a city that's encircled with a wall. In other words, in a halachic Reshus HaYachid. Afilu, if the city is completely in ruins, it's not about whether people live there. It's just about it being in a halachic Reshus HaYachid in Shabbos, or if you put it in a ma'ara, but on a ma'ara, which is a naturally built, it's a natural enclosed area. For it not to have a din of a carmelist, let's say, then mahalach has kula v'chutzala alpayim amal l'chol ruach. Very good. What happens if a person is taking the city in Los Angeles and they put their Eruv at the other edge, but still within the city? What did they do? 0. They did nothing. Because when you're kind of your shvisa in a city, then you only start counting the 2,000 amas from outside the city. Makes no difference whether you were in your house or whether you were on the other side of the city. So you didn't do anything. Why would you? You're minded from the outside of the city. When we also learned about those was any physical part of outside of the city, which is halachically considered part of the city. Again, you didn't accomplish anything. Also, if you placed your Eruv outside the Tchum, and that's key, if you place your Eruv outside the Tchum, then you accomplish nothing. Because the shot of the Eruv is that I am able actually to go there and to have that food. You placed your Eruv out of Shabbos. You walk back to your home. If that food was beyond the Tchum, then you can never get to it. If you can never get to it, then it's not your food for this Shabbos, and it's as if you did nothing. Okay, that's the basic concept of Euruvin. Now, just to appreciate, unlike the last topic of Euruvin Chatzeres, where let's say someone can be mezaka for me the Eruv Chatzeres, which is what people actually do nowadays, because it's only a schus for me and not a chayva, that is completely not related to Eruv Tchumim. Eruv Tchumim doesn't give you more area to walk in. Eruv Tchumim only changes where you can walk. It's really a person can only walk 2,000 amas l'chol ruach, which is a total of 4,000 amas. 2,000 to the right, 2,000 to the left, 2,000 front, 2,000 to the back. When you place your Eruv in another location, you don't get to walk 1 millimeter more than those 4,000 amas. The only question is where. Now, every person might want to use that amas in a different location. You can never place an Eruv Tchumen for someone without their consent, as we're going to learn soon. But the halacha vav is something that most people are not aware of. The Rambam says that an Eruv Tchumen lechatchila should only be placed if there's a mitzvah need. Halacha vav ein ma'arvin Eruv Tchumen elo l'dvar mitzvah. Now, the bar mitzvah here has a very broad application. That's clear. This is not the only time, but you constantly see that on Shabbos people would visit the Beis Ha'avel. All right, even though the Avel is not sitting Shiva in the traditional way, but when you visit a person who's in mourning on Shabbos, you're doing a mitzvah. You're going to Hashem Abrachas. Look at what the Rambam writes. You have a friend that you didn't see for a while, and you want to fabreng with him. That's also called advar mitzvah. That's one type of reason that justifies placing an Eruv Tchumen. What's the fear? Obviously, it's not pikuach nefesh, for that you don't need anything. But you want to have the option that just in case there's going to be a riot, so then you'll be able to go further away from the city. Or listim that you heard might be going through this area. That is lachatchila why you may place an Eruv. However, says the Rambam, im Eruv, but after the fact, it's still valid. Okay, halacha zayin. Kol shemishtat from boy is referring to the items. One of the big differences between the Eruv Chatzeres and the Shit of Movois was the type of food. Eruv Chatzeres is very exclusive. You can only use a whole piece of bread, a wholesome piece of bread. For Shit of Movois, we learned what did the Rambam paskin? Chutz. I think there were 4 items: chutz min hamayim, chutz min hamelach, and mushrooms and truffles. So kol shemishtat from by all food that can be used for a shituf, ma'arvim by Eruv Tchumen, which is great. Not only that which you use for an Eruv Chatzeres, but if something cannot even be used for a shituf mavais, ein ma'arvim by Eruv Tchumen. Another din, the kama shir Eruv Tchumen. Now here's key. If you remember by the shituf mavais, even though up until a certain point, everyone has to give, right? The total that we said was the 18 gregeres. But once you reach more than that, then you don't have to give more for each person. That's the maximum limit. By an Eruv Tchumen, every person has to have their mazon shtei seudas. Mazon shtei seudas chalach leyachad. But if the food that they are giving is not food that people eat for nourishment, but it's something that they normally eat with bread, and the Rambam was lenient by the shitut muvois that you don't need to have the 18 gregeres of meat. You only have to have the amount of meat that people eat with mazan shtei seudas. That is also over here. Kedei lechol by shtei seudas k'moi ha shituf. Halacha ches v'tzorech sheyehu beiruv b'makam echad. You have to make sure that this person is in the same location. What are we talking about? Same location. So for the I'm placing my food before Shabbos, guys, out there. Let's say I'm going to the limit, whatever it is. I'm going 2,000 ounces. I'm going 1,000 ounces. I'm placing my food somewhere, and I plan to eat it there. If I'm going to be in one place where I plan to eat it, and I'm placing my food, let's say I'm going to place the food in a Reshus HaYachid that I'm unable to enter, and I plan to be shoyvis right nearby in the Reshus HaRabbi, it's not a good eruv, because you may not you're not allowed to be you cannot transfer from Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabbi. Because you have to place the food in a place where there is no halachic prohibition for you to take it. Now, why is it Rambam emphasizing bein hashmashes? Because now that we established in halacha vav that lachatchila a native tchumen is placed with dvar mitzvah, we learned in Hilchos Shabbos that bein hashmashes there are certain leniencies that are given when it comes to dvar mitzvah. If the violation is only of rabbinic nature, so now we're going to have, because of all of this together, various leniencies. And you put your eruv right there, or the opposite. You have in mind to be shoyvis in the Reshus HaYachid, but you put your food in the Reshus HaRabbi, which that transfer is asan midoiraisa, and therefore even on bein hashmashes, because it's a suffix deoraisa, you may not make that transfer as well. Ain't an eruv at all. In contrast, in this and the physical place where you hid your muzzin was in a halachic karmelis, and even though you may not carry from a karmelis to a Reshus HaYachid or to Reshus HaRabbi, but it's only midrabanan, then it is an eruv. Why? Because when does the eruv go into effect? Bein hashmashes mutar lahoitzi ulahachnis mikol achas mishtei harishois lekarmis ledvar mitzvah. And the guys, here's the key. We just established in halacha vav that an eruv tchumen is placed ledvar mitzvah. Shekol davar shumid divrei seifrim legozru all of bein hashmashes b'makim mitzvah ebishas adchak. Okay, halacha yud. So here halacha ches and tes was that I placed the eruv b'makom that halachically I will not be able to take it. Now in halacha yud we're going to learn about a scenario where you place your eruv and you technically cannot take it. For example, you put your food in a migdal vinal and you locked it. Right, there was a closet and you locked the closet and you lost the key. So there's no halachic issue. Well, there is a halachic issue about breaking. We'll see in a moment. Guys, malacha means a malacha doiraisa. Then there is an eruv. I'm giving this example because, like mekalkel, the Shabbos is takasim midrabanan, but it's pater. But if you're able to get it out there without doing a malacha, then you have an eruv. She'ein isur lasis ben hashmashes b'makam mitzvah ella, a proper malacha, and not, he's saying, and not something that's only asim midrabanan. The sunny b'roish hakonem. Here we have an exception that in this case will be machmer. If a person put it on the top of a reed or on top of some sort of shaft, which is growing out of the ground, eina eruv, it's not an eruv, because we have a gezeda that if you'll be allowed to use that food, you might end up uprooting the reed. We just said that normally, if the issue is only a gezeda, which means the midrabanan, the eruv does go into effect. The level of the possibility of when you are taking food off the top of a kana, that's a very flimsy, it's just a reed, is so high that this is the exception. But if this reed was already uprooted, it's just stuck into the ground, then it's no problem. How do you say it? Okay, halacha yudalef. Whoever places the eruv, which is what we're talking about in Perek Vav, right? The eruv, which is through the hanochas oichel, yesh lo b'makom eruvei arba amos. First, you have daladamas. And then beyond your daladamas, you begin counting the 2,000. And why is that important? He says, Gavaldik, lefikach. Someone put it mamish at the border. You put it 2,000 amos away from your city. And Vinisgalgal Ha'edo, which means on Bein Hashmashas, the wind blew the food, an animal dragged the food. I don't care how the food was rolled, but where did it roll to? It went beyond the Tchum, but it only went 2 amos. Now, guys, here's the Gavaldik word of the Rambam. When you say that when you place the Eruv in a location, I know you only have 2,000 amos to each side, but first you have 4 amos. Not 4 amos here, 4 amos there. A total of 4 amos. And how do you count those 4 amos? Wherever the food is, 2 amos to the right and 2 amos to the left. Not 4 amos in each direction. So if the food that was l'chatchila placed at the boundary of 2,000 amos went even further, but it only went 2 amos and not more, and we just said that the makim of the food, there you have 4 amos, which means 2 amos in each direction, then you're still good. But the moment the Eruv rolled beyond a millimeter, beyond the 2 amos, now it's mamish beyond your tchum. And as we learned in the beginning of this Perek, because you won't be able to get. How great is that? Okay, halacha yud beis. Or the Eruv was lost, or the Eruv was burnt, or when you placed it, the truma was edible truma, and now it became tummy. So when do we need for the Eruv to be be'en, ba'olam? If that happened prior to Bein Hashmashas, Eina Eruv. If it happened only after it got dark, even though after it got dark, there's no food you have there, there's nothing there, got burnt. Misha Chashecha, it is an Eruv. Why? Shekiniasa Eruv happens during Bein Hashmashas. Now, if you have a doubt when it happened, the Imsafik, look how lenient we are. Still, it's an Eruv. As long as vadai, the food that you placed was good for a moment, you have that chazaka. You just don't know when it got ruined. Then we say safek. You can be lenient. Your safek Eruv kosher. Lefikachem nechalo Eruv bein hashmashis. Now that Rambam has a big chiddush. What's bein hashmashis? We keep on learning. Bein hashmashis is a safek yom, safek layla. I know when my food got destroyed, or when an animal ate it, or another person ate it. It happened during bein hashmashis. Well, if Bein Hashmashas has a din of Laila, then my food was only eaten at night. Then it's good. Halachically, we have a doubt. But because we just established that if when you placed it, there was a Vadai moment and it was good. The suffix is only when it got destroyed. Even if it got destroyed, Bein Hashmashas, yes, Hadeze Eruv. Wow. Halacha Yud Gimel, Amr Eloi Shnayim, Seva Arev Oleinu. Here, as it becomes clear, I don't need to be the person that places the Eruv for me. I can appoint a shliach to do so. And like we just mentioned before, verbally, that one may not do it on their own for me because it's not an act of a zikoy. Who says I want to be shoyvis over there, which will limit my walking to the opposite direction. You can only walk 2,000 amas to each direction. But if you send a shliach, that's kavaldik. Now, what happens if 2 people told the same shliach, "Seva arev oleinu, place food for me"? Echad erev olav ba'odyom. The shliach, for whatever reason, did not put the food down at the same time. For one person, he put the food down, which is ideally when prior to Bein Hashmashas. The echad erev olav Bein Hashmashas, and the other set of mazon shtei seudas, right? One for the Euruvin, one for Shimon. For the Uvin's food, he put down before Bein Hashmashas. And for whatever reason, Shimon's food he only put down Bein Hashmashas. What do we say now? If you put down the food Bein Hashmashas, it's going to be good because it's suffix. Because we can say, Bein Hashmashas is day. So Zesh Erev Olavim Ba'odyom Nechaladu Bein Hashmashas. And furthermore, the one whose food was placed prior to Bein Hashmashas was eaten up during Bein Hashmashas. So for you to say it works for that person, you have to paskin. Yeah, Bein Hashmashas is already night. These 2 people are not using the same Eruv. Even though it was placed by the same person, they're not bound together. Every person is judged separately. For every person, you're going to paskin any way that will make it lenient for them. Because since Bein Hashmashik Safiku, and for each one be paskin, Safiku Eruv Kosher. Nevertheless, if Safek Chashecha, Safek Loi Chashecha, if you are in Bein Hashmash's time, lechatchila says the Rambam, ein ma'arin Rubitchon lechatchila. Don't put it down Bein Hashmash's. Don't lechatchila be soymech on the safek. The im edav, but if a person did so, even knowing that he shouldn't have, no one is penalized over here. How does it?
The Kiddush is that the assumption for each one contradicts the other one.
Correct, and they both use this, and they both use the same shliach. Just because they use the same shliach, they're not bound by the same rules. Everyone has their own shayla, but we're not done yet. More sfekes. Halacha yudalid nafal alo eid of galma b'yoyim. A gal means some sort of building collapsed on it. So what's the rule? What did we say? The rule is that if getting to your food during Bein Hashmashos is not going to violate a malacha, now that's not so simple, because in most cases, when a building collapses, going through the rubble is going to be a violation. So the Rambam is going to speak it out. Like we said, even if you're violating a rabbinic. But if a pile amount of building fell on it after it got dark, that's not a problem. Doesn't bother me. Now, if you don't know when this building collapsed, so then again, that is a kosher. Even though it could have happened, you don't know, you have a doubt. In contrast, here comes a big chiddush over here, which many of the Rabbi disagrees, but says that Rambam in Erev B'Truma. She's suffik to meyom. What happens if the food that you have, there's a doubt whether you may eat it or not? It's not an Eruv. Why is it not an Eruv? Why don't we say that it's a suffik? I'll tell you why. Because if a coin would have been there, would he have eaten it? A coin de facto never would have eaten it. Why not? Because it's a suffix of its stomach. No, it's if there's a doubt in the Metzias, was it burnt at what time? So we don't know when it happened. So we can be soymech that it happened already later. But here, the food lachatchila, you understand? You're using a suffix tamei dika food. No matter when a kohen would have gotten there, the kohen never would have eaten it. Not because the kohen is saying vadai tamei, but because whenever you have a suffix, if trumas tamei, you cannot eat it misafik. So if someone would never eat this food, it's not a good eruv. Ein eruv she'ein suda ro'uyam.
If you're Yisrael and you use truma, is it okay?
That's another thing. We're going to learn soon about that. It doesn't have to be edible to me. We have it also by eruv, by the sheet of voice. It has to be edible. Let's go see. The Rambam is going to address it. I think what I said is correct. If not, then we're going to correct ourselves from the Rambam. But the point is that even if you only need a kohen to eat it, a suffix will vadai never eat suffix truma. That's the word. And you don't know which one, guys. Each one, obviously, each kicker has enough of the mazon shtei seudas. That must be. And you're putting both of them down and you're saying, listen, whichever one is kosher for me to eat, because one of them is starved, I'm relying on that. Also, Eina Eruv. Because you won't eat it. You won't eat neither of them because you have a doubt. Now we're learning dinim of making stipulations. A person is able to make a stipulation when it comes to kachim, that this now is still a chayil. Tomorrow it should be chal, the kachim. And you use the eruv. What would you think? Now, guys, once it's kachim, you may not eat it. But when you said lemachar kodesh, when is the kachim chal? What does lemachar mean? When it's a vaday night. So then eruv eruv. Shebein hashmoshes adayin leniskacha vaday. And it began with v'reuya hoysami ba'odyom. Unlike the case of Tezvav, where you had a suffix tuma or two kikrais, that even mi ba'odyom you had the doubt. Here, mi ba'odyom for sure it's chayil. Avalim amar hayom kodesh l'machar chayil. Now how that works, I don't know, because once something is holy, I don't know how. But in the cases where you can make this work, ein ma'arvim ba, because since it began as kodesh, it only becomes vaday choil at night. Like there's the cheskas meikara. The same type of stipulation can be made by Truma. A person can make such a stipulation. Now, if you say this is only Truma Mishatachshach, what is it before it's Truma? It's Tevel. Tevel is not good. Tevel no one can eat. Truma, at least the coin can eat. Ema Arvaba. Shadehi Tevel kol ben hashmashis. And v'tzarech shetehei hasu'uda hara'uya mi ba'od yoim. Okay, halacha yud zayin. Now we're going about location. If a person places his Eruv in a Beis HaKvares, it's not an Eruv. Why not? Listen to this. Lefisha Beis HaKvares asur b'hana. And that's a very important halacha. I know lahavdil by the goyim, people go to the Beis HaKvares and they bring a bottle of mashke and they drink l'chaim. Okay, but I'm saying you can't have any hana in a Beis HaKvares, which includes eating or drinking. So imagine you're placing the food there. You're kind of shvi. No, you can't be kind of shvisa there. You're not allowed to eat there. That's called having hana. This is a private location. This is, it's not to the Shus Rambam. You're benefiting by its exclusivity as a cemetery for eating.
The proof of someone's a shaykh, they sleep in a cemetery.
That's something else. They sleep in a cemetery to be imbued with,
So, but that's kind of shvisa.
You're not allowed to do that. That's an isur for itself. The kiven sheroitze b'kiyum eruv sham achar kiniyah. Well, okay, he's not speaking about the eating there. He's speaking about you wanting the food to remain. It should be guarded. That's the he's saying. So you want the food to be safe kept, because if it's going to be eaten up before ben hashmashos, it's probably not going to be good. So and it's not good. In contrast, if you put your food in a beis hapras, there are many types of beis hapras. Let's speak about a place where there was a grave. The grave was plowed over. Midrabanan, there's a chashash open to a certain distance that maybe a fragment of the bone is on the top of the ground, and therefore etzem is matamik isoira. Rabbinically, you cannot go there. Wow. And even if it's a kohen, 1 second, but a kohen, just like we said, safek truma won't go there. This is a truma de rabbanan. You could go there. You know how you can go into a beis hapras? Either b'migdal hapoideyach. The Migdal hapoideyach today would be with the airplane, with the helicopter. But then it also meant someone can put you in a wagon, and other people can carry the wagon as long as you're not touching the ground. We're going to learn about oil, zaruk. The Rambam holds that the bottom, the floor of this migdal is separating the tumah from the ground to you. A kohen is allowed to be in there, or as we learned, if you blow on the ground very strongly, so even if there's a bone fragment, it's like you're going through a minefield. You can go through such a beis hapras. Since there is a way for a kohen to get there, it is considered a valid day. Halacha yudches. Rabim sheratzu lishtate be'eruv eitchum. So then mekapsim kolam eruvim. Everyone, like we said, has to give shtei seudas halacha v'echad. And if it's a whole group together, umanichan oisa b'klei echad, in the place that they all consented to. Furthermore, ve'imasa echad eruv alidei kulam. But if only one person is going to be getting the food and he's going to want to be mezake it for all, tzarich l'zaka islam alidei achar. So number one, there has to be an act of zikri. And we learned this already in the previous chapter of the Chos Euruvin. An act of zikri means if I own this food, I cannot lift it up on behalf of everyone. Of course not, because it has to leave my reshus for other people to be able to acquire it. So first of all, you have to use another. And number two, every individual has to be notified. Here's the chayin, Rabbi Yid. We're placing your tchum in that location. Unlike the Eruv Chatzeiros. Now, if that person was notified prior to Shabbos that we were Mazakin Eruv for you, even though he did not say, "Oh, I'm happy with that," he said nothing. He left it open. So still, since he knew about it before Ben Hashmashis, later during Shabbos already said, "Oh, that's great. That is an Eruv. That means it's an Eruv lemafreya." You understand? Because he never consented clearly. But if he only was notified after it got dark, because the act of zikui was not chal at all. Why not? Because it's not an act of zikui. But this is a chayiv if you don't want to be there. When you do this act of zikui, so you have to know hilchas kinyanim. Like you have to be an adult. And we learned this before in Hilchas Euruvin. whoever is allowed to be used for the act of zikoy for Euruvin Chatzeros, that is the person mizaken al yodei be'Eruvin Tchumen. We learned all this, I think, in Perek Aleph noch. B'chol mi she'ena mizak al yodei Euruvin Chatzeros, ema al yodei Euruvin Tchumen. Halacha chav. Noisen adama al balabayis. A person can give a coin to a person, to a balabayis, not to a merchant. Asking that person to make an act for you. Now, by the way, you can rely on him that he's going to do it. The money itself is nothing, right? He has to, that balabas is going to have to actually acquire bread, make a halachic kinyan on bread for you, which is meshicha, right? We're going to learn the hilchas kinyanim. So the din is that you can rely on him, on a balabas. But if you're giving to a storekeeper, you're giving to a baker money, and you're telling them Zakei li b'ma azu, so then is einoi eirov. Wow, he might forget to do it. This is so practical. In other words, if I'm going into a store, he's busy selling merchandise to people. If I give him money, he already got his money. Will he actually lift up the? Will he be mezaka bread for me? I don't know. Don't forget, money doesn't make the king, and he has to take the bread. A balabas, you realize. However, v'im amarloi. But if the communication is more explicit, he doesn't just say have zaken liba mazu means have someone acquire the Eiro for me. If he tells arev alai b'ma'azu, establish an Eiro for me, he says these words: establish an Eiro for me. Then we can rely. It's the more explicit of a statement you make. That's a very good rule in marriage. If you communicate very explicitly, there's a much higher chance that the other party, is gonna take it more to heart. Even though Zakeli, he understood what you are referring to, but he didn't use the words Eruv. Now, the im nasan like keli, but amar like tenli was the oichalos keli buying. Then, because that's called a bona fide king and chalipin. In other words, don't forget, guys, you have to actually own it. Now, one way of owning it is, the ideal way is to make a mashiach on the food itself, or you give money. That's the whole point of the spedic. Just giving the money itself is not the kinyan. There has to be a mashiach. But if you made a kinyan chalipin, then you own the food already. Halacha chafal. Ma'arev adam eruvit chumen al yidei b'noi ubitay haktanim. Can I establish it for someone else? We just said, no, you have to get their consent. However, there are exceptions. My minor sons and daughters, I can place an Eidov for them. Bein midaton, bein shaloi midaton. Lefikach, therefore, im Eidovu aleim be'Eidovu la'atzman. Shaloi midaton means even if it's against their will. Even if they made their own Eidov in another location, the father's or the master's Eidov trumps theirs. Yoitzin only b'shol Rambam. Guys, you can never have two Euruvin because you can only walk 2,000 hours in each direction from where you're taking in Shabbos. You can't put an Eruv to the right and an Eruv to the left. So here, the father put it here against their will to the Mizrach. They put it in Maidav. What they did is not valid. However, Avol Eina Ma'arav Aloi Alidei B'noi Bita Agdalim. I cannot, Ma'arav Alidei means I cannot do it on their behalf. Not even through Avdei V'Shevachasa Yo Ivrim. And guys, not even for your wife. Ella midaton. You have to have their consent.
Why is everything else normally you can do for your wife, but here you can't?
Not everything else. Not everything else.
I mean, a lot,
Not this. And even though they're eating off your table, you have to have their consent. Now the Rambam goes into nuance. What happens if you made an Eider for them? These are people that live off your table, they're your household members, and they heard about it and they were quiet without making a protest. They never consented, but they never made a macha. So then the din is yoitzin be'eruvay. However, if Erev I'll call echel mehem, and they were quiet, they didn't make a verbal macha, but they made their own Erev in another location. Well, that's the greatest macha. And therefore, ve'yoitzu only be'erov atzman. Katan ben sheishanim pachos. Child that's 6 years or younger, we already established Rambam. We're going to go with that sheeted way that Rebbe explains in Ochos Talmud Torah. That ben sheish Rambam means when he turns 5 years old, because when someone is celebrating their 5th birthday, what's really happening is on that day they already entered their 6th year. He's yoitze be'eruv iman. And therefore, not the Eruv Aviv, be'eruv iman. And you don't have to put for him a Muslim shteis udas la'atzmai. Now you can argue he's a minor, he's not mechuyev, but not because of chinuch, especially biyodayim. We're not going to take our child on a walk beyond the tchum. Here you are allowed to do it, but he's automatically included not in his father's Eruv. It's all about food, about and you eat with the mother. Halacha beis. Haroitze l'shaleach eruva biyad acher laniach le'mamakim shuroitze l'kveish shas yisham. If you want to send your Eruv in the hands of a shliach, even though the Rambam already alluded to such a case, right in Halacha Yud Gimel, but now he's speaking explicitly about it. Harashus biyada, you could appoint a praxi, you could appoint a shliach. However, now let's go into the hilchos shlichus. Eina mishalchai biyad chedesh, nor shaita, nor of a cotton. V'loy biyad nisha eina meider mitzvahs eruv. You know, the guy's going to do you a favor. Now you go on Mitzvah today, you say, put on tefillin, the guy doesn't want you say, do it for me. If he did it, he did a mitzvah. Shaloi l'shma, he did a mitzvah. Here, if the guy doesn't believe in an eruv, but he's doing you a favor, if he doesn't believe in the eruv, he cannot place the food for you. And not only lechatchila v'im shilach eina eruv. However, the big however, when do we need to have an adult who is mentally there, a believer, not when he receives the food from you, but only when he places the food in its new location. And therefore, I have with me a cotton. I'm asking the cotton, do me a favor, take the food to Chaim. Chaim is an adult. I'm asking this not yet believer in Euruvin, take it to Chaim. So from me, it was taken by someone who's not valid, but it was handed over to someone who is valid because you don't need. It's not about it's leaving miyad hamishaleach. It's about its placement, and therefore, if you put it out, you give it to a monkey, you give it to an elephant. It's also going to be good. But now there's a question: how do you know they actually gave it to the person who's kosher? You have to see that. Because if you don't see it, how do you know that they actually did it? And they did not make any more instruction. Make an eruv where didn't say the eruv aleim be'ezeruch sheratza. Since the mishaleach never specified, the shliach has the power to choose where. However, he gave some specification, and it appears to be something inconsequential. But he specified, I want you to use dates. And that shliach used the figs, or begroigeris, and he used tamarim. Or another detail that you can argue is inconsequential. But the Meshaleach says, place the eruv in a closet. And he put it in a chicken coop. It's just as protected. But he didn't follow the instruction. Bashoivach, v'nicha b'migdol. Babayis, v'nicha b'aliyah. B'aliyah, v'nicha babayis. Since he deviated, eina eruv. How great is that? If the Meshaleach doesn't specify, then the Shliach has a lot of leeway. But if he does, then you have to be faithful. Here again, the
reason why it has to be like very important is so that he doesn't go beyond it, so he knows where it is. Is that the logic? No.
No, because the guy, the shliach left it the location. He put it in the same location.
So why is it?
Because that's the rule by shlichus.
It has to be specific.
The Rebbe said tut alts vaser ken. So then anything that you do, you can argue you're doing with the Rebbe's koyach. If the Rebbe would say do A, you got to do A, not B. Halacha chavdal. Kishem shemevarchem al eruvi chatzeres v'shitufei mevois. Even though it's midrabanan, as we explained, and you say Asher kedisharu v'mesveisav v'tzivanu, kach mevarich al eruvi tchumen. And by the way, it's the same exact bracha. Asher kedisharu says v'tzivanu al mitzvahs eruv. And then you add, just like by the eruvi chatzeres, you add a statement. Here you also add a statement. You have to say what you're doing. That the zecho eruv yehimutali not to l'chol b'nei beisi, because you're only putting food. You're putting it for you. Every person has to have their own food. From where the food is going to be placed. Then he says, so we concluded the basics of Euruvin, and what the Rambam is going to do now in Perek Zayin is going to tell you a Gavaldik bar that actually everything we learned is not even the real original way of making an Erev Tchum. Ideally, an Erev Tchum means that you should actually, it's called to be ma'arev beraglo. You should walk to that location. Not to trouble you to walk to that location, they allowed for you to put food there. So let's go inside. So now we're going to learn in Perek Zayin the Erev Beraglav, and we're going to learn something even greater. That you're kind of shvisa berichuk makam. I'll just speak out what that means. That means that if you're planning to be ma'arev beraglav, not putting food, you're planning to walk there. In some circumstances, even if you only began to walk there, as long as you know where you want to walk to, it's as if you walked there already. And we're going to see in certain circumstances that you don't have to walk out of the city. You don't have to walk, I don't know, you can take a couple of steps. If you live in the second story, you can start walking downstairs. Wow. Okay, let's go. Perek Zayin is much shorter. Perek Zayin only has 10 halachas. We're going back to the normal size perakim. And beginning with halacha aleph. You can appreciate this. This is like a third of a chapter of what we have until now. Halacha aleph, mi sheyatza me'erev Shabbos chutz l'medina. If a person actually left their city, and he stood in a specific place, and he made a declaration verbally, and guys, he was there during the Bein Hashmoshes. Just like we learned in the last chapter, your food has to be there. He was there without any food. I'm acquiring, Shabbos for me is here, and then after Shabbos came in, he goes back to his city and he sleeps in his bed. Just because he returned to a city and he slept in his bed or he ate in his house, since he was at that location while Shabbos came in, he can only use that place as his Makom Shvisa. And the 2,000 Amas is counted not from his home, not from his bed, not from his dining room table, but from where he was Ma'arev Beraglo. And now the Rambam says, actually, really, that's the main way you make it, which is la'arev beraglav. So the Rambam began without the ikar because people de facto use food. It's a lot more convenient. But for that, you have to be wealthy enough to be able to afford to give up 2 seudas to place it there. Not many people were poor. Ella, putting food was only to make the life of a wealthy person easier. Right, the wealth got wealthier. Everything is easy for them. So first they established the concept that if you are ma'arev beraglav, that's an eruv. Then they added, oh, you know what? You don't have to go there, but you have to really show you're going to be there, and you do that by putting food there. Now we're going to take this la'arev beraglav, we're going to extend it now. We're going to expand it. But here there's many nuances. The most important nuance is that if for whatever we're going to learn in base, for it to work, I have to know exactly where I'm planning to go. If I have intent to take in Shabbos at a certain location, I know exactly where it is. You don't have to know on the map, on the Google. You have to know on that tree. Like there's a certain landmark, and you know that landmark, and that's where I plan to take in Shabbos. For a tree, or a bias, or a fence. As long as that landmark and where you are in your home is within the tchum. Again, the yesh so you know where you're going to. You're not putting an erev with food, you're being ma'arev beraglav. And guys, here are the words. Vehechazik baderech. You started out on your journey. We're going to see soon, starting out on your journey can be something very minute. But you started to go there. You begin to go in order to get there to the ma'arev beraglav, even though you never reached your destination, which means you certainly didn't stand there. You were not there when Shabbos came in. Someone distracted you. Look how we are beginning. something stopped you from making that journey all the way to that specific landmark, as long as you knew which specific place you plan to make your Eruv, and you plan to make the Eruv not with food, but you plan to walk there, and you began to walk, and you stopped the journey, it's already good enough. That's called, you're a kind of shvisa, even though you are berichuk makim. Hanachas oichlin, ma'arav baraglov, richuk makim. Very good. Shekiven, shegamar v'libay lekvoya sham. Sham means in a specific place, and you began. The beginning can be a step. V'hechzik baderech, nase kemi she'amat sham, oishen yechuruvei sham. Halacha gimel. Now again, we're going to limit it. That's only ba'ani she'ein matrichen oisa l'niach eruv. Latrichai, guys, is this guy doesn't have food. Oy berachaik k'goy mishahay babaderech v'hoy yoreshama techshach. No, he was going to go there, but he didn't go there. He's an ani because there was a reason. Another nuance. When am I kind of shvisa dani? If when I set out on my journey, I was actually able to make it there begashmiyas prior to Shabbos, and not by walking normal. Even if I can only make it there if I were to run, that's fine. As long as I am able to run, even if I have to run with all of my koyach, but if I would have done so, there is a potential of me reaching there. Means you could have gotten there and returned, then it's good. You have another conditions. It means there was no reason. There was no reason why you should not make it there. Stam. And you're not poor. However you define this, because if you're not poor, it's expected of you to put food there. Or you decided to be kind of shvisa there a little bit too late. It's not before Shabbos, but even if you were to run with all your koyach today, it doesn't mean to run. Today it means to go with your car. Would you have to have the gashmistic ability of getting there, but you didn't have that. Or that place is beyond 2,000 amma. Or, now this is very important, that you don't have a specific landmark in mind. Now, guys, I want to get to the neighboring city. That I know. And the neighboring city is 3,000 amas away from where I am. That I know. And therefore, it's resolvable by placing a native tchumen. I have to place it in between my city and that city. Well, I know all that. But if I don't know of a landmark, even though I know towards which direction, and I know more or less how many amas, it's also not good. So you don't know the specific place. You don't have in mind a specific place. Hey guys, putting food is great. Being ma'arav baraglov is great. But to do this stretch, you didn't even get there. It's as if you got there, you have to have some specific place. Now, what happens with the Eruv? Again, now we're beginning to go base. We're expanding, speaking out the basics of Eruv Tchumen. Like we mentioned, if the Eruv is in a Reshus HaYachid, walking in that Reshus HaYachid doesn't deduct any of the 2,000 Amma. You can walk that Reshus HaYachid and outside of it towards each direction, 2,000 Amma. Or you are in a tail, or you are in a bikom. So now we have to follow the same rules we had before in Hilchos Shabbos. If it's Beisosayim or less, which means that that you are allowed to carry in there, so it's a bona fide Reshus HaYachid. Here again, not 2,000 amas from your food, not 2,000 amas from your makim ma'arav baraglov. 2,000 amas outside this Reshus HaYachid, which is great. Which means that midrabanan you cannot carry in that location. It's not a normal Reshus HaYachid. That ein leba ela arba amas. Arba amas, like we said, is from where your food is, from where your ma'arav baraglov is. 2 amas in each direction. A total of 4 amas, and then beyond it, the 2,000 amas l'chalru. Same thing. So you can carry it, right? 4 amas and 2,000 in each direction. Halacha 5. You did not specify the exact location. As we mentioned, it doesn't work. Look on a shvisa sham. Ketzah. Guys, sada ploinus is too broad. Or bebika ploinus. Or berichuk, exactly 1,000 amas. But you don't know the landmark. Where are you from there 2,000 amas? Omar, let's go. What happens if you begin to specify? So let's go to what detail? You say, I'm kind of shvisa under that tree. You knew that tree. Or under that rock. Well, how much space is under the tree? That's going to be key. 8 amas or more. That's already terrible. Why is that terrible? Because 8 amas is halachically 2 places. A place is 4 amas by 4. If it's 8 by 8, then which from the 8, which 4? Like on a shvisa. So you did not mamish specify your location. You know how you resolve it? I'm going to spend Shabbos by the roots. That's called big mechaven. By arba amas in the dorim or the arba amas in the tzafim. But if you didn't speak about the roots, you didn't say which direction, but all of the area under the tree is less than 8 amas, not 4 amas. It can be 5 amas, it can be 6 amas, it can be less than 8. Less than 8 is not 2 makaimas. Less than 8 is 1 makim. Then it's good. Then it's chavelish b'istachtav. Then kana sharei ein sham shir shtei makaimas v'rei mixas makaimim mesuyam. Hoy yishnai moim baderech. 2 people are walking. Now, guys, we're going to do the shvisa of berichut makaim. But one of them knows the landmark. He knows the tree. He knows the fence. And his chaver that's traveling with him doesn't know any specific landmark. He can rely on the other. That's a leniency. And it works. Wow.
Oh, sorry. So whatever the landmark is, you get up to 8 amos if you don't know exactly? Or you have to specify
under the landmark, you have 8 amos, you have to specify in the landmark, the northernmost part of it. What happens if I am planning to send food with a shliach, and the shliach is doing this? The shliach began to walk, and for some reason the shliach never made it there. If I'm sending someone with food, my friends, you got to put the food there. Amazing. Listen to this, Danny. So we send the food in the shliach. We don't get to use it because he never made it there. But the shliach himself, since he was the one that was walking there, so he departed. So he gets to count on it.
He was going there. He was just trying to establish it for you and for himself.
It must be that way.
Okay.
Now he was not. But who kana shameru? Sharehu babaderech. V'nischaven lishbaysham.
The third category of him intending.
Him intending to. So he was on everyone. For everyone else, he was bringing food. For him, he was going to be ma'arif beraglav, and now we have this heted that once you go to be ma'arif beraglav, even berichut makim. Berzig bam. Lefikach yesh only loy lemachal al chalash makim. Olach lemeno paim lachadu. Halacha nine. Zeh shomarnu shetzarach hakoyin shvisa berichut makim sheyask barderech. That even that is good enough. So you might argue he has to go some journey. How much does he have to walk? That Rambam says a tremendous leniency. Not that he has to leave the city or already be in the field. You live in a 2nd-story building. You begin to walk downstairs. And you didn't even leave. Here you go. You left your house. You didn't even leave your courtyard. Wow. Another leniency. Normally things, kavanas have to be verbalized. Not here. You don't have to verbalize the landmark. You have to have it in your mind. He didn't make a peep. He was not taking food. He was planning to walk there. But he knew in his mind where he's walking. Kanasham Shvisa. If you actually are out of beragla by standing there, you don't have to verbalize anything. Final halacha you. Hatalmidim sheholchem v'olchem v'leil Shabbos b'sadas b'kram. Eitzel balabatim shepitam etzoyim lo evre derachim aboyim sham. Uboyim lalum bebeis hamedrash. So you have talmidim. Where the students in the yeshiva eat, that was always a challenge. In a scenario where the Beis HaMedrash was in one location and the tag that they ate, the balabatim around stable they ate, is in another location. So now the question is, we keep on, like, what was the beginning of Hilchos Eruv and Hilchos Tchum, the Perek Vav? We began by speaking about food, right? The food is the ikar, not where you're sleeping, where you're eating. By a Talmud, guys, the food is the ikar. But you know what? A Talmud doesn't care about the food. He's only eating by the balabas because there's no food in the Beis HaMedrash. A good Talmud, if he would have a dining room the way we have today in yeshivas, why would he waste time to go to a balabas? He wouldn't. So even though the ikid is where you're eating, and they're eating in a balabas, they don't count it from the balabas. From the Beis HaMedrash. The eating is the ikid, yeah. But it's not the actual eating. It's where they ideally would have wanted to eat. And if Talmidim would have food in the dining room, they would not waste their time going to a balabas. So therefore, what a beautiful conclusion of Perek Zayin. We are beginning with the final chapter of Hilchos Euruvin. Perek Ches. We're going to learn about various stipulations when it comes to an Eruv, meaning one akuda. You can only have one Eruv. Because, like we mentioned, you can only walk with the Rabban and Alpayim Amal L'chol Ruach from your Makom Shvisa. The only koyach that they gave you through this Eruv Tchumen is that you can choose where to make your Makom Shvisa. But if I'm placing it to the Mizrach, I'm gaining on that side because I can walk even more 2,000 amas, but I'm losing from the other side. So what happens if I do want to place two Eruvim? We're going to learn about Tanoim. What happens if I'm going into a 2-day Yontif? And we're going to see that Yontif, a person is bound by the Eruv Yontif the way they're bound on Shabbos. So can you place an Eruv for the first day Yontif on one side and for the other day Yontif on the other side? That will be all of the topic of this chapter. This chapter has 15 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Ein manichin shnei Eruvim. A person cannot place two Eruvim, one in the Mizrach, one in the Maidav. In order for the Friday night, I'm gaining to the Mizrach. Shabbos day for the Maidav, no. For one day, you cannot place two Eruvim. And therefore, why did he put Eruv Tchumen on this side and on the other side? Because in his ignorance, he thought that you could be ma'ad l'shtei ruchos. Or if he told two shluchim, and one of them, and like we learned in the last chapter, if he doesn't specify, the shliach has the right to put it wherever they so want, and one shliach punkt happened to put it l'tzafin, and the other one put it l'daring. You know what we say? We don't say that Ki'ilu there is no Eruv and he's kind of Shvisa in his house. Much worse. We're very machmir. We say that he's bound to both Eruvim, and therefore he can only walk in the areas that overlap the tchum of both Eruvim. For example, halacha beis keitzad mahalach kiraglei shneim she'eni yachal lahalach ela b'makom sheyesh l'shneim lahalach boy. If there were to be two people, and one would have put it, the one that was placed in the mizrach, the other one would have put it l'maidov. Well, guys, if they are only, let's say, 1,500 amas apart, then there is a 500 amas overlap. One was placed 1,000 amas to the mizrach. The other one was placed 500 amas l'ruach maidov. How many amas do you have left? 500 amas. Ein zeshe eruvi olav mahalach b'maidov elov ama. Ella elov ama kerag l'bishor b'mizrach. And v'le'halach b'mizrach ella elov hamish b'mizrach b'maidov. Because he cannot go away from either eruv 2,000 amas. Lefikach im eruv oy eruv olav shnei eruvim elu. And each one guy put a 2,000 amas to the mizrach, and the other one put a 2,000 to the maidov. What happens now? 2,000 and 2,000. This guy cannot walk anywhere. Mizrach maidov. It's only where the area is overlapping is within both of the tchumen. A person is, however, allowed to put down two Euruvin in two different directions. And that's because, let's go to also the Rambam Paskin, that an Eruv Tchumen l'chatchila should only be done by market mitzvah. So I'll tell you a mitzvah. You're living in a village here. There's a village to the right, 3,000 amas, which means without an Eruv Tchumen, you can't walk there. There's a village to the left, another 3,000 amas. You need an Eruv Tchumen to get there. There are two Chachamim coming to give lectures, one to the right, one to the left. You don't know which lecture you want to listen to. You didn't decide yet. So this is a classical case of Breira, of retroactive clarification that the Rambam Paskins, that the Dinei Derabanan, which is this Eruv, this Tchum of 2,000 Amas, is only Midrabanan. Midoiraisa, you can walk the Rambam up until 12 mil. So by Dinei Derabanan, we say Breira. So it says the Rambam, a person can place two Eruvin and make a stipulation by saying that if something will come up, or there'll be some sort of necessity, that's a tzorech, and the necessity will come up to the one to the right, then and which means, of course, that the Eruv to the other side is nothing. I don't want to be bound by both. I'm only going to use one. And the he's saying all this before Shabbos comes in. So then that one, and therefore he's saying clearly the other one is Einoi Klum. And then he says more. If I'll find out during Shabbos, Friday night, that I have a need in both ruchais, then I'll decide which one I'll use. But I'm only going to use one. Means I'm leaving my decision to be made already once it's dark Shabbos, once it's already in Shabbos. And furthermore, you know what? Maybe I'm going to choose not to use either. Maybe I want to be kind of my shvisa here. Neither of them are an Eruv. You are allowed to make such a stipulation. That's Breira. And that's a din derabanan. And it works. Halacha dalal. Guys, the big question that everyone has on the Rambam is that, don't forget, the Rambam said that Chumen on Shabbos is midoiraisa. The 2,000 amas midrabanan. I want you to know that on Yom Tov, Chumen is only midrabanan. You're not going to be chayiv malchus if you walk beyond 12 mil. Anyways, that's what the Rambam is kishem kach, is because on this 2,000 amma distance, they're both equally awesome midrabanan. And the same on Yom Kippur. Now, what about carrying? Carrying is a bit different. Carrying may not be done on Shabbos. Carrying may not be done on Yom Kippur. But on Yom Tov, as we know, on Yom Tov you can carry. And therefore, lefikach ma'arvin eruvei chatzerois umeshtarfim b'mavois on Yom Kippur. You have to make that for Yom Kippur for Shabbos, because on Yom Kippur you're not allowed to carry if you don't have an eruv chatzeros or mavois. And when it comes to tchumen walking, and that's a hagdama. I mean, that's a din for itself. You have to know that. But now, halacha hey, now let's put together. If Yom Tov falls near Shabbos, that means Friday Yom Tov, or Friday falls out on Sunday, or if you have Shnei Yom Tov Shel Galiois, even though Peidik Ches made a rule very clear, you can't have two Eruvin. You only can have one, but you can only have one for one day. You can have one for today and one for tomorrow. Now, there's a nuance here. You can't use Yom Tov to prepare for Shabbos, even though you can carry on Yom Tov. So, let's say Yom Tov is Friday. I can place one to the Mizrach, one to the Ma'ariv, and say that one is for Yom Tov, one is for Shabbos. I have to place them more before Yom Tov. I can put two Euruvin, one in one direction, one in the opposite direction. And not only that, as we learned in Halacha Gimel, that I can leave my decision to L'boy Bayoim. So I can put two Euruvin, as long as I'm making it clear. I want to do whatever I want. I want to have the option of using one for Shabbos and one for Yom Tov. No problem. Ma'arev Eruv Echad also, L'ruach Achas, I can put an Eruv in one direction, and I can say, I'm only going to be using it if I want for one of the days. I'm not bound one for the other. He can, and then the other day, whether the second day is Shabbos or whether the second day is Yom Tov or 2 days Yom Tov other than Rosh Hashanah, and that's fine. That if you put one for Yom Tov, l'shnei yomim, you can say, I'm going to use it only for one day and not for the other. That's only b'shnei yomim tovim shel galiyos and avada Shabbos out of Yom Tov or Yom Tov out of Shabbos. Aval b'shnei yomim tovim shel Rosh Hashanah, we pass and they are like one day, and therefore be'enam out of b'shnei yomim ela l'ruach hachas halacha vav v'chein masna adam alei rubai. A person can deposit an eruv tchumen and make the following stipulation: Eruvi l'shabbazu avalei l'shabbos acheres. Guys, obviously, presuming that the food won't be consumed, you have to have the food there. But just I can make that a clear stipulation. Or l'Shabbos acheres avalei l'zu, or only for Shabbos, l'Shabbos seis, and not for Yom Tovim. Only for Shabbos. For one day, you have to have one eruv. But one day doesn't bind the other day. One Shabbos doesn't trap you, doesn't trap you for the other Shabbos. Allah Chazayin. When a person tells 5 others, I am establishing one eruv on behalf of only one of you, but I'm going to choose later which one of you. Now, obviously, we have to put this together with the dinim that we learned previously, that they have to consent, but they all consented. But he never decided for which one. Ratzisi, if I will choose, that's the way you have to teach it. If I will choose tomorrow that it'll be for the Euruvin, then Euruvin can go. If I won't choose the Euruvin, then the Euruvin won't be allowed to go. Even though the person who placed the eruv only made his choice after Shabbos came in, here again, Breira, it's fine. Yelech. Because Davar Shum and Divrei Seifrim, that Rambam Paskins, we have this concept of retroactive clarification. Now, one thing is important. They all needed to know about that. That there's a possibility. We already learned this in the previous chapter. I'm putting an eruv down and I'm saying I'm going to choose later which Shabbos. Potentially any Shabbos. Every Shabbos, I'm going to determine whether I want to reline the eruv or not. And if I'm not going to reline it, I will be just like any other one that lives over here. Then Kol Shabbos even though he made such a choice, one Shabbos came in, because once he made that decision, we say that goes back retroactively. A person put an eruv, right, for 2 days Yom Tiv or for Shabbos and Yom Tiv, even if it's an eruv, right, one eruv in the same direction. If I'm placing one eruv, guys, I'm just giving a heads up over here. You can't be mechen mi Yom Tov l'Shabbos, m'Shabbos l'Yom Tov, even from the first day for the second day. So when you are before a 2-day Yom Tov, you have the right to place, an eruv here. If I'm placing this eruv for both days, I'm placing it before the first day Yom Tov. I want it to be effective also for the second day Yom Tov. It must be there for when the second day Yom Tov comes in. You hear, Danny? Pshita. The only exception again will be now lekula l'Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is a yom echad. So Ketzad Hu Oisa, guys, is a practical question. When you put food outside the city, there's always a likelihood that another person will steal it, that animals will eat it up. So Moilichoi be'erev Yom Tov, be'erev Shabbos, umachshich olav. So one practical thing is, if I don't have where to hide it there, so if I'm going, guys, on erev Yom Tov, now umachsh v'noitloi biyadoi, once the food was there when Yom Tov came in, what can I do? I can come back. Ubaloi. When can I carry? Guys, you can't carry on Shabbos. So the Rambam has to clarify that this option of you taking the food back once it's dark is only im hoya lel Yom Tov, because that's when you are allowed to carry. Now, Danny, since I put it there lachatchila for 2 days, so now then tomorrow Yom Tov again I can carry and I can bring it back there. And I can eat it there if it's Leil Shabbos. Or if it's Mishabbos Yom Tov, now it's another case, I put it there before Shabbos, and it's Yom Tov is Sunday. So I left it there Friday night, I left it there Friday afternoon, and I said, this is going to be Cypher Shabbos, Cypher Yom Tov. I can walk back there on Shabbos, not carrying, and I can eat it there, or I can bring it back if it's Yom Tov. No, it's not like Rosh Hashanah. It has to be there for both days. It has to physically be there. But if it was eaten up on the first day, it's fine. It works for the whole first day. But you have no Edo for the second day. Now, what did we learn in Perek Zayin? That the Iked Edo is not even putting food. There's a concept of being Ma'arev Beraglov. Let's apply this now to La'arev Beraglov. Edo Beraglov Berishain. Just because you walk there, Tzarech La'arev Beraglov B'Sheni. You have to walk back to the same place. You can't make a declaration in the beginning of a 2-day Yom Tov. See, I'm here, and I'm koina my shvisi here for today and for tomorrow. Nish. Only for Rosh Hashanah you can do that. And the Yachshiv Beliba Shikna Sham Shvisam. Now, Erev a Pas Berishain. What happens if you put bread to the first day? A Yom Tov, and you carried it back, which is fine. It was there when it was dark. Now you want to be Ma'arav Beraglav, that's fine. Imros La'arav Bepas. But if you want to be Ma'arav Bepas, Tzarech La'arav Be'oisa Pas Atzm She'erev Rishon. You have to use the same bread. That's the key. That's what we keep on saying. You have to bring back. Why? Because if you are not bringing back the same bread, you're using the first day for the second day. You're making the Yom Tov l'chaveda. I said that, and there's some halachas here that if even though you're taking it back, since it's the same bread, that's not called you're being mechen the Yom Tov l'chaveda. Gewaldik. Yud. Yom Kippurim Shchalias Erev Shabbos Yila Achar Shabbos. Now, this is not something that's possible once there's a calendar established. The Rambam is making it clear. Taka, this can only happen Bisman when Mashiach is coming, and we're going to go back now to be Mekadosh Al Yedei Re'iyah. So there, Yeroy Li, that Yom Kippur and Shabbos are Kiyoy Mechad. Why is that? Because Ukadusha Achasei. It's amazing. Unlike 2 days Yom Tov, it's one is only a suffix. Unlike Shabbos and Yom Tov. And therefore, guys, what's beautiful, you don't have to, the Eruv doesn't have to be there for 2 days. Well, the reason why nowadays we made the calendar ba'ofen that it should never fall out, there's 2 reasons we have. One is because of Kvura. If someone passes away, you can bury 2 days in a row, or for vegetables. Anyways, we're going to learn that when we get to Halacha Yudal. Wow. In other words, listen to this, guys, that these 2 mekoimos cannot be far from each other 2,000 amma. Means on the same day you can walk from one to the other. Amazing. This is not the case where you made a stipulation. There, it can be much farther away. If you're saying, I'm going to decide tomorrow which one to use. Here we're speaking about a person who's being ma'arev with the same food for both days. That's not called you being mechen the Yom Tov l'chaveroi. The food has to be there. And we said, furthermore, I can put erev Yom Tov food here and food there. Now these 2 foods have to be within 2,000 amma. Because by Yom Rishon, you're bound by the food in one direction. You have to be able to get before Yom Tov. Because Shaha'erov mitzvah says she'yeh v'suda ro'im about yoim. If it's there, hoil any yoch lagiel zeh Yom Rishon. Wow, ein zu ro'im about yoim. Allah had you base ketzah that ishin echruv b'richa kalpayim am bebeis ruach mizrach, and you're putting it down at the first day Yom Tov by being soymechan for some chol Yom Rishon and being echruv b'richuk amma achas. Only because it's 2,000 amas to the mizrach. If you put it even 1 amma. Guys, you put all this down, Danny, erev the first day. And for samach olav l'yom sheni, you're just saying that this one will be for day Yom Tov number 2. Ein hasheni erev. Shaharei b'yom harishon, ein za erev, hasheni ro'u loy mi'ba'od yom. You see, we need for it to be ro'oi mi'ba'od yom. L'fi she'en yochal ageh elov, she'rei l'nisha b'roach ma'erev k'u. Avol halach yud gimel, if you put your erev on a berichuk elef, achamish amma mi'beisoim b'roach mizrach. And you're saying out of both days Yom Tov, but you're doing this out of, this is going to be for the first day. And again, out of the first day Yom Tov, you're putting the second Eruv L'Yom Sheni. But where did you put it? V'niach Eruv Sheni Yirachim Beis L'Ruach might have 500 amas So Eruv here and Eruv there are within the 2,000 Abbas. Kavaldik for some of them. Sheni Hareze Eruv. Sharei Efshalei Shiagia Leviyam Riyaim Rishain. Halacha Yudalid Yom Tov Shchalias Be'erev Shabbos. If Yom Tov falls out on Friday, Eina Oisa Eruv B'Yom Tov. You may not make an Eruv on Yom Tov. Lo Eruv Chatzeres v'lo Eruv Tchumen. You understand, guys? Because the Eruv is going to be for Shabbos. You're being Mechin Miyom Tov l'Shabbos. So when do you have to do everything? Prior to Yom Tov. Ela ma'arahu v'yom chamishi shu erev Yom Tov. Now the Rambam says, what happens if it's a 2-day Yom Tov in Golus and then that goes into Shabbos? Right? So it's Yom Tov Thursday, Friday, and then there's Shabbos. So when do you have to make all of the Eruvim that we learned in this series? It has to be done on Wednesday. And if you didn't do it on Wednesday, so says the Rambam that Eruv Chatzeros. Now, guys, what are we doing Eruv Chatzeros for? Halkop. We just learned this in this chapter. Only for Shabbos. But since you can't be Mechem the Shabbos, the Yom Tov Shabbos, you have to do the Eruv Chatzeros, which is only needed for Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov. I got it. But here you have a leniency. Since you're doing it only for Shabbos, and really the 2 days is a suffix, so we are lenient. If you didn't do it, which you should have done it on Wednesday, you do it on Thursday, and you do it on Friday, and every time you do it, you make a declaration, if today is really Yom Tov, so what I'm doing now is nothing. But if today is really not Yom Tov, then this is today's Erev Yom Tov, then I'm doing this for Shabbos. And then you do the same thing again the next day. We'll see umasna in a moment in the final chapter, halacha. But Eruvei Techumen may not be done because Koine Shvisa is a kinyan. And even though it's a suffix, that's the kinyanim is much more serious. So you have to make the Eruv Techumen, guys, Erev Yom Tov. And if you didn't do it, you can't. Allah Tezvav, what is the stipulation that you make by Eruv Chatzeros, Omer B'Chamishi, which is really the first day Yom Tov? Im Hayom Yom Tov, if today is Taka Yom Tov, then what I'm saying now is nothing. But if today is not Yom Tov, because really we got it wrong with the calendar, that's how we came to the 2 days Yom Tov. Which today is really Erev Yom Tov, then this is my Eruv Chatzeros. But since you have a doubt, so you have to repeat the same declaration again on Friday. Then I already did an Eruv yesterday. So my words are not needed. And the aim of the Varayam Klum. But the aim is Yom Tov. So therefore what I did yesterday was nothing. Then but here again, the final time, since it's Kiyom Echad, no such a stipulation may be made. So if the 2 days Rosh Hashanah, by the way, this is something that falls up many times. It's 2 days Rosh Hashanah going into Shabbos, and if you did not make an Eruv Chatzeros on Wednesday, you cannot make an Eruv Chatzeros. The Einam Arav Lahem Elam Erev Yom Tov. B'rich Rachmana D'Sayon. Chavra Mazel Tov. How great is that? Wow.
What's it saying? That if